I speak English, sort of, right? Well, there's a multitude of ways you can speak this language, and today I want to tell you a story, a language story if you will. I want to tell you my journey through the many different ways I have spoken this language in the past. Welcome to Rasputin Lingo, my name is Israel, and this is a storytime video with a twist. To the best of my ability, I will try to reenact the accent that I had at each stage of my journey. It won't be easy because my muscle memory has changed a lot since then, and also I can't really replicate the level of English I had at the time. But what it won't be is offensive because I'm imitating myself, not someone else. Also, I'm curious to know how the auto captions will deal with that. But before we jump into it, leave a comment and tell me, what's your favorite accent? And what's the worst one? And as we move along the story, let me know how you would label each of these accents before I tell you my own description of them. Okay, so where did I learn English? Why, in school of course. In Hong Kong schools, we have the biliteracy and trilingual policy, which means we study English and Chinese in schools from a young age. We don't do any other foreign languages though, which is a shame. But we do learn ABCs in our kindergarten. So I keep telling people, we learn English so early, we could have become native speakers had we learned through immersion instead of studying. The mainstream English accent in Hong Kong is the Cantonese accent. And even though I don't have records of it, because I went to local schools, presumably at some point I might have spoken a little bit like this. I mean, I was never bad at languages. That's why I speak like a dozen now, I guess. So the sounds I might have struggled with would be quite subtle, like think, this, very, sheet, truth, bat, and ring. Interestingly, we also keep some British English features that Brits have mostly dropped, like saying here and there in 2 syllables. And if you are wondering, yes, the usual way people speak English in Hong Kong is the stereotypical Chinese accent. Well, most comedians and people on YouTube don't really do it justice. I can tell a fake Hong Kong accent from a mile away. Why? Apart from the consonants and vowels that we sometimes cannot say, the most distinguishing feature of the Cantonese accent is the tones. When we speak in English, regardless of how we say the sounds, we always assign each syllable into one of the tones in Cantonese, depending on whether the syllable is before the stress, on the stress, or after the stress. So it always sounds like da-da-da, like distinguished, unfortunate. And if we have a very long sentence stretching out ages, it will stay in the high tone until the next unstressed syllable. So for example, we would say emotional, but emotional damage. That's why teachers would tell us to use intonation so that our English would not be flat all the time. And even now, when I try to enunciate, such as on YouTube, my friends tell me that my tones still come out a little bit, which means my brain still secretly filters pitches into our tonal categories. The first accent I know for sure I had was this one. I call it the international English accent because it's rhotic like American, but we enunciate all the vowels like international, and the vowels don't bend like Americans say hot and plan. Obviously, the Cantonese tones and vowels still had an influence on the inflection, like I would say but instead of but. The reason I know I had this accent was because I tried to be a YouTuber at the age of 16 in English. The videos are still up on my personal channel, but obviously I'm not going to show you any of them.
Hello YouTube, this is Israel. This is the first time I've ever filmed myself. This feels really awkward, so don't tease me.
Oops.
But soon, the another side of me told myself, get a life man, you're 15.
No. That's all you get. Do subscribe to that channel though. I put my music on there now. And why did I come to have this accent? My guess comes down to 2 main reasons. For one, at the age of 14, I started watching YouTube. A lot of it. That was the prime era of Ryan Higa and Smosh, so there might have been some American influence on how I spoke. So I might have adopted some elements of American speech. The other reason is that at the age of 14, I spent a month in Vancouver at a summer English course. So my Canadian teacher for sure would have had an influence. Apart from the intonation that I mentioned earlier, I don't think I paid much attention to my pronunciation until late in my school years, when I was encouraged to take part in prose reading competitions. That's a kind of competition where you read aloud an excerpt from a book in public in an expressive manner, kind of like poetry recitation, minus the poetry. At the time, I was in a school where the head English teacher put a lot of emphasis on pronunciation, especially in British English pronunciation, which is why I pivoted that way. Through the prose reading training, I was taught to think about the subtleties in pronunciation, like clearer consonants, like B and V, different vowels, like bad instead of bad, go instead of go, and I also started saying badly with a for extra poshness. And phonology, like how is and was end with a Z instead of an S. I distinctly remember the moment when I realized that the word village ends with a schwa as in age instead of an A sound as in age, village. That was a life-changing moment. And of course the aforementioned intonation as well. But intonation is really hard to teach. In order to teach it to us, you would have to uninstall the tones in our brains and then analyze how entire sentences go up or down. As a result, we simply attempted to avoid a flat tone in a sentence and add more ups and downs in a more exaggerated manner. So at the time, you might actually hear me speak like this. And don't forget, I did learn it in the context of a performance. Now you still might notice some distinctly Cantonese features that might sound unnatural to you, which takes us to the next stage. At this point in time, I still had a pretty neutral take on the accent wars. Then around the time I went to university, I started having a certain thought. I thought my English skills and my English pronunciation were pretty decent, and if I were to take it any further, I would have to start imitating a certain dialect or accent. And that was the time I settled on British English. The main reason is that Hong Kong English, which we were taught, is primarily based on British English for obvious reasons in terms of pronunciation and grammar. For God's sake, we imported the word lift as leap in Cantonese, and we use the word come all the time. So why not go along with it? Halfway through university, I spent a year in Sweden. But don't worry, I didn't pick up a Swedish accent. Instead, I spent a lot of my time binging Doctor Who. Specifically, the Matt Smith era.
Surprise!
He speaks with a broadly southern accent, which is close to RP. And during the winter holidays, I flew to England and France for a grand tour. And while I was in London, I went to a meetup organized by a man that would single-handedly lead to my next accent change, who would also become my boss for a little bit. That man is Ollie Richards, who at the time was known for the blog I Will Teach You a Language, but now runs Story Learning. So what is the change? What's the difference between this accent and the previous one? If you haven't noticed in the last section, it's timing. While I was talking to Ollie, who used to teach English and had a background in linguistics, I asked him what he thought of my English pronunciation. He told me about a pair of concepts, stress time and syllable time. So I went home and dug into this. If you've never heard of them, it's a pretty technical thing, but you might have noticed a subtle difference between the rhythm in the two sections. Cantonese, for example, is a syllable-timed language, which means the length of each syllable is approximately the same. English, by contrast, is a stress-timed language, which means the time between each stress in a sentence is approximately the same. That was when I realized, unless I learned the timing, no matter how well I pronounce the sounds, the rhythm would always give me away. But that's fine. Rhythm is a core part of music, and I'm a professional musician. Check out my music channel. Rhythm has been drilled into me since forever. And now that I understood the concept, I could just apply my musical training to it and fine-tune my speech rhythms. So I did literally that. So I took some sentences, picked out which syllables I wanted to stress, and started a mental metronome in my head. Let's take this sentence for example. If I wanted to go further with my speaking, I'd need to think about accent. There are 4 subdivisions from want to fur, 4 subdivisions from fur to speak, 3 subdivisions from speak to need, 2 from need to think, and 3 from think to ack as an accent. So I simply converted that into musical terms. So I'd go da 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 da. If I wanted to go further with my speaking, I'd need to think about accent. And I'd practice that like it's a piece of music. So for a while, whenever I spoke English, I actually had a metronome constantly ticking in my head until it came naturally to me. I wouldn't say I had it down right away, but that for sure freed up the rhythm in my speech, so it would no longer be just da 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 da. And if that effort doesn't deserve a like, I don't know what does. So I brought all of that home with me. I also started making finer adjustments to my vowels. Soon after I returned to Hong Kong after the year, I met up with a friend who said, "Wow, Israel, your vowels are so round now." What he meant was, for example, the vowels in or and brought were much more closed than the ones you'd have in all and brought. Now, I'd never claimed to be able to do any accent perfectly, but I was pretty satisfied with how I sounded, which I'd later learn is called received pronunciation. Later, I went to Oxford for my master's degree in composition. Note that back then, I had no knowledge of the diversity of British accents. Exactly 1 week into my time there, on my birthday, Jodie Whittaker's first Doctor Who episode aired, which was incidentally the first one I'd ever watched live, because I just arrived in the UK.
Come to Daddy. I mean, Mummy.
Now, Jodie's from Yorkshire, near Huddersfield, where I've been to a few times for a prestigious contemporary music festival. And her accent was so strikingly different that I thought, oh, that's wild. She and Mandip Gill kept making sounds like, "let's go," which really left an impression on me. The next day, I went to a house party and met someone who speaks with a similar accent. And my first reaction was like, "Oh my God, you sound just like the new Doctor." So there's that. And soon after, a different Doctor came into the story, namely my GP. He generally spoke with an RP accent, except one notable difference. The sound. While he was talking to me, he kept saying the word done, and I thought, wow, that vowel sounds sexy as fuck. I want that vowel. Thus began my journey into various British accents. I watched videos of people comparing them and explaining various dialectal differences. I paid closer attention to subtle vowel discrepancies when listening to people speak, and semi-consciously, I repeat semi-consciously, I began picking up some sounds one by one, starting with the aforementioned cut vowel, aka I undid the foot strut split. Just like how you should subscribe, or subscribe if you're southern, to this channel. And as I kept moving northwards to Birmingham and then eventually to Manchester, I had more of a reason and also a better environment to adopt features such as saying master instead of master, and also the more open or sound in northern and more. I even made some changes completely unknowingly, such as dropping the H's, glottalizing the T's, and ending the ing with an N. Maybe it's because I've studied a dozen languages, which sort of heightens my ear's sensitivity to things like these. So if I were to put a label on the way I speak now, which is impossible because my way of speaking will always be influenced by my upbringing, I'd say it's some kind of Northern RP or posh Northern. And it's not like I'm constantly making an effort and putting on an accent, but rather I've cultivated muscle memory in my mouth such that this is my normal, natural, most comfortable way of speaking now. You're very welcome to analyze my recent live streams to hear how I talk unscripted. In fact, during my gap year, I did a job where I narrated a Hong Kong documentary film in English. At first, I tried to put on my best RP as it's most widely understood, but then it just felt weird. So when they asked me to redo the entire voiceover because they wanted a different expressive style, I just switched to my most comfortable way of speaking. So the question now is, am I settled? Will I still change? And my answer is, I don't know. As a non-native speaker, I'm not beholden or emotionally attached to any particular accent, unlike, let's say, an American who moved here. My accent doesn't mean much to me and who I am, so I can be a sponge and speak any way I see fit, or even play with it a little bit. And in fact, I often do act like a sponge when I'm talking to people with drastically different accents. I gradually absorb some of their features during that conversation. But on the other hand, precisely because it can be a choice, the way I speak is also a way of presenting myself. And no matter how I speak, it comes with all kinds of advantages, disadvantages, impressions, privileges, and baggage. When I'm at the pub, when I have an interview, when I give a talk, like I've done many times in the past, when I present myself as a creator on an international online platform, the way I speak has all sorts of consequences. And even recently at the pub, I was made fun of for speaking posh, despite being an immigrant myself, which comes with naturally all sorts of connotations and assumptions about who I might be, thanks to Britain's seemingly complex love-hate relationship with poshness. That's why I think and talk about these things quite often, even though I'm already comfortable with how I speak. Lately, I've been experimenting much more, both with the monophthongs, like in the words late and both, and with variations of the vowel. I noticed that Lancashire tends to have the cut vowel, while Yorkshire is more like cut. On the whole, I just find that it sounds much more relaxed when you say take the car instead of take the car. Also, I love the words nout and out, and I will protect them till the day I die. But at the same time, I have to ask questions like, when is it pushing too far? Is it overdoing it to use features that are so locally specific? I've lived in Manchester for about 2 years, and I weirdly like the place a lot, and I feel at home there, but I don't really belong there, or at least I'm not of there. And I feel like accent is something that's very closely tied to identity. If I'm not part of a group, even if I could do an accent perfectly, which I can't, it just wouldn't feel right to me. So will I end up speaking a local dialect? No. I don't think anyone should or even can learn the specific local accent or dialect of a place that they are not from, or at least identify strongly with. I know one non-native speaker who speaks perfect Mancunian, but because they had a partner who is from there. And as an outsider myself, if I suddenly started speaking a regional dialect myself imperfectly, especially when I don't know the local words that people use there, it'd probably sound quite jarring. And I could come off as appropriating or mocking the culture. But thankfully, the best part is that my accent is easily changeable because it's not really mine. Plus, Manchester is such a cosmopolitan place that unless you go out to Greater Manchester or you hang out specifically with people who grew up there, you don't really get exposed to one specific accent. So for now, I'll just continue exploring, always listening, always appreciating. Thanks so much for watching all the way. If you liked this video, which you probably did, feel free to support what I do on Buy Me a Coffee. You might also enjoy one of these videos. If you want to see me do language immersion in a new language, as opposed to what I did in English, living here and observing people, go and check out my series of videos from Lithuania. And if you want to learn more about the linguistic landscape of Hong Kong, check out the talk I did for the Jagiellonian University, which is subtitled in English. Bye.